Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Well, everybody, we have something very special for you today.
Ooh.
It is another part of our sex series. Now, last year, we had recorded the sex series just before COVID hit.
Yes. We were like, oh, this is going to be so good. It's going to help people feel and deal.
But then the train wreck that was life happened for everyone. And we didn't want to take such material that was such heavy content into a season.
It's not heavy. It's just a tender subject for people.
It
we're
is
like,
a tender
everybody's
subject.
already feeling all their emotions about COVID.
They don't want to feel things about
and all
this
of
area.
America and politics. And so we just thought, like, bring some hope into last year.
So what's really cool about this episode is you'll hear our good friend Laura Duncan, who's been on the podcast before. And we introduced her inside of the episode, so we're not going to go too far into that. But it's wonderful because we get to have a dialogue about both men and women regarding sexuality and pornography, and also her journey of participating in helping the healing process, especially for men as a woman. And so it's really cool what we get to hear.
And I actually love this. It's not these two episodes actually weren't heavy. We could have released them last year.
Yeah.
Because they're very inspiring and hope filled and helps give you some emotional intelligence and help understand what's going on in humanity around sexuality.
So today's part 1, and then next week you'll hear part 2, and we really hope that you guys are as affected by it as we were by creating it.
Yeah.
All right, go away. Not away from us, like not away from the podcast.
No, listen to the podcast.
No, stay with the podcast.
Wait, why would you say go away, Justin? You failed.
Yeah, I'm going to go away.
Yes.
I'm going away. Goodbye. Abby's staring at me going, are you going to start this or am
actually,
I?
what was happening is I wanted to wait till you started and then I wanted to jump in right then.
And cut me off?
And cut you off. Yeah. Because I thought that'd be
That feels like the entirety of our marriage. You're just waiting for Justin to start a conversation to cut him off.
No, wait. Okay. We have very different cultures. In my culture of relating, we just all talk at the same time.
Except, so I started, I took you up on this. And I started cutting you off in conversations. Like, why are you cutting me off? I'm losing my train of thought. I'm just trying to be you. I thought this is how the game goes.
But the funny thing is, sometimes Justin will do his culture, which is not talking while I talk. And so then I just keep talking longer and longer.
You just got to fill the space.
I do. I have this like weird mechanism where like I have these friends and they don't jump in and talk much. And I find myself over talking, and I'm not an over talker normally. But if you give me the room.
Yeah, so don't give her room. Anyone who meets Abby in person, just keep talking. Our friend Laura's in the background laughing. We have a special guest today.
Woo!
Today we are doing, we're going further into the Restoring Sexuality series.
Yeah, which I'm so freaking stoked about. I've been wanting to do this actually before we started The Connected Life a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
I wanted to do this series because it's something that we all, and we brought Laura on because she's a shame guru, not a shame guru, a compassion guru. We could call her a beating shame, like a ninja guru.
Wow, your description for Laura sucks.
She's a shame
creative.
shaman.
I like that.
But I'm not shaming you, just so you know. But you're doing terrible at the introduction. Now, for those of you who have listened to the podcast for any amount of time, we've had Laura Duncan on in the past, and she's amazing. She's great with compassion and connecting to people's hearts.
Yes. And so we brought her on here, and we're all going to talk about porn.
Wow, what an introduction to pornography. So part of Restoring Sexuality is part of this series. A big involvement is the conversation around pornography and how our sexuality kind of takes a nosedive as human beings and why we express ourselves in certain ways. And we're wanting to help people really find freedom. And we can only really find freedom from the things that are driving us when we understand ourselves. Yeah. And so a big component in today's conversation is us digging into like, what is the driving force behind pornography and some of our sexual decisions that we make?
Yeah, I know Laura actually teaches in men's groups about sexuality.
You've talked to like hundreds of guys.
Hundreds,
Yes.
Who are all sitting there because they have porn addictions, right?
Yeah. Multiple times. I've done kind of retreats where they're doing like that whole like coming to and talking about those things, as well as just in men's groups, and very common and very important. That's actually a big part of how I started doing what I do. That was my first audience.
Really? Was men?
Struggling with porn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that intimidating for you, by the way?
You know, a little bit, not because of sexual addiction or pornography or whatever you want to insert, because it's not completely all pornography, but sexual addiction, pornography being one of the leading sexual addictions. It was in the sense of, I thought it was going to be more intimidating. I thought that there would be more resistance. I thought there would be just kind of like a closed door. But I will tell you, that group of men was more open than churches. Then, I mean, they were part of a church, but like full on churches, and, you know, people that you would think would be super open because they would want to be getting free from that. I, in some ways, felt more resistance in other groups, not even just talking about sexual addiction, just talking about shame in general.
Right. Because the guys were already there going, hey, we all know.
I got shame. We all know it.
We're all a little left up here.
Exactly.
No one's trying to hide.
If we're in the group, you know that we need help.
Exactly. So they were like relieved. And when I first started meeting with them, I didn't have an office. So we're talking in coffee shops about sexual addiction. And they are like snot crying, and you know people can hear
in the middle of Starbucks
because coffee shops are not that big. And a part of me would be a little bit like, "Ooh, I'd be personally a little embarrassed, like talking about this issue in front of the public." But their desire to be free from it was so strong. It was like nobody was in the room.
Well, and I want to say that that's something that I tell people. I was so effed up, so screwed up in so many ways, and still am in many, but I've overcome a lot. And one of the things I say for me and my clients who get the most breakthrough, it's the people who are willing to pay whatever price to get out.
It's
the people who actually know how much the prison is costing them. It's the people who want out. Like, so we all are measuring pain all of the time. Is the pain of changing greater than the pain of staying the same? And so what you're talking about is you met with a bunch of men who realized the pain of staying the same
is way worse.
Is so bad. I will share with a woman in a coffee shop about all of my things because I want to get free. And I've seen that with men and women who struggle with porn. The ones who get free are the ones who are willing to own it, vocalize it, pursue healing and health, and be willing to do whatever it takes to get to the other side.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with porn is not ever the issue with porn.
Yeah, that's really good.
So when you start communicating to men about it, what do you say?
Very similar. It's not a porn issue because they think it is. Like, they sit down in front of me and I ask them, why are you here? And they say, because I have a porn addiction or I have a porn issue and I'm here because I need help.
Yeah.
And I usually come back at, I can't help you with that because it's not really the issue. And if we spend all of our energy and time trying to make it a porn issue and fight it like it's a porn issue and overcome it like it's a porn issue, we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to keep going around in circles because that's not really what it's about.
Yeah.
I once had that reminded me of a story of a mom who got on the phone with me and was just like, my son's into pornography and this is horrible and I need him to be fixed. And what do I do to fix him? And I was like, well, he doesn't have a porn issue, and you should probably let him go on the journey of his porn issue instead of getting up in the middle of it the way that because her approach to it was very shaming. Like, why are you doing this? This is horrible. Do you know what these women are in? And I'm like, that's not actually helping him. And he doesn't have a porn issue. And she fought me on it. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. We found it in his browsers. I was like, but it's not a porn issue. Your kid is in an environment where he feels completely voiceless and controlled by you and your husband. and he doesn't have the freedom to have a voice about a lot of pain going on in his life, and you're not asking him any questions. So he probably is feeling very powerless and out of control in many areas. He's probably feeling very rejected by both you guys and kids at school because of some of the history he had. But in that process, she was completely offended and couldn't let go of the idea that it was a porn issue, because at the end of the day, it triggered her more about other issues than it really had anything to do with him.
Yeah. And so I think what we would all say is that porn is a symptom, that there is stuff going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
And you can, I always give the analogy of like an orange tree where, if you like, let's say oranges, are the worst on the planet.
Yeah.
So,
Oranges.
And so every time an orange starts to form, you like run and you pick it off the tree and you throw it in the incinerator. And so like you spend your whole
Die, orange.
every day you are watching the tree to see when it's going to create new oranges so you can pick them off and then throw them away. But it takes all of your energy and attention, and you never actually are making momentum because it never stops.
Right.
It just keeps reproducing. If you go and chop the tree down, you don't actually have to watch it every day then, which is what I say is like porn. The issues that drive people to porn, when you get love, comfort, empowerment, when you find out what's actually going on underneath the surface, and then you get that healed, it will change what their behavior begins.
Yeah. What is, Laura, some of the things that you saw even dealing with the men's group? What are some of those underlying issues that you saw?
I would say consistently, because I kind of look for like the common denominator, I'd say consistently, it was the lack of being with, meaning that they had the lack of being with potentially in their childhood, lack of being with a spouse or close friends. They didn't have that togetherness. And so that togetherness causes you to constantly be looking for togetherness. And pornography is a form of togetherness, which the average person is going to be saying, how could that be togetherness? But it is.
It's a fantasy of togetherness. Yeah. And one of the other words that I use for the same thing you're describing is deep loneliness. Yeah. It's that abandonment or that loneliness of not being one with another person. Yeah. And I find that especially when we talk about masculinity, there's been an overarching cultural idea of what men are allowed to do as far as connection goes.
Right.
And we have very limited scope of what connection is allowed to look like, especially in the ways of getting into each other's pain and actually grieving and crying with one another, or being
emotional intimacy, verbal affirmation, physical touch. Like men are taught.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say this. I literally had a guy on one of my clients that I consult. He was sharing with me about an incident that happened recently. So he's on a motocross outing with a bunch of his buddies. They're all in their late 30s, mid 40s, somewhere in there, and they go out together, and they're very successful guys, doctors, business owners, and stuff like that, who are doing really well at life, so to say. And at the end of the day, one of the individuals looked at another one of them and said, Hey, John, great job on handling your riding today. You did so well because it was so rainy and crazy, and just proud of how well you did. That guy calls my client up later and goes, did you hear what Mike said to me? Like, I couldn't even barely go to sleep last night. Like, he told me that I did really well, and it was so, like, my mind kept racing and I just couldn't sleep because of it. That's how drained of relational intimacy, even in the ways of affirmation, that man, and he's an example of most men, are living a life in, experiencing. Right.
So there's this, and I would say, like, we're all kind of saying the same thing. The way that I talk about it is, I have found that most people who struggle with porn have bonding issues. They don't know how to attach. Yeah. They don't know how to connect. They don't know how to get their needs met. So actually, I would say I would bet 90% of the guys that I work through porn issues with, I start with them having deeper relationships with men. And they never, like, that sounds like so crazy when you say, like, you probably have issues with masculinity. Like you probably need love from men, which is the opposite for most of them because they're watching porn about women. Not all of them, but so I'm looking at it and they are like, wow, what does that mean? But I'm like, no. When you get healthy connection and when you're known, which I think you said to be with.
Yeah.
Another I think word would be known. We had somebody that we knew that whenever they wanted to look at porn, like they'd gone on the journey of self-awareness, which is what we're going to talk about. They'd gone on the journey of self-awareness and they understood, oh, when I want to look at porn, it's because I'm not letting people know what's going on inside of me. Like he was a really good listener and really good at being around people, but didn't necessarily always share what was happening inside of him. So whenever he wanted to look at porn, he recognized, oh, this is because I'm not having the back and forth that I'm made to have. And so what he did is he would then, as soon as the feelings started coming up, he would immediately go to people and start just sharing. This is what's going on inside of me. And that is how he began to, if you fill your tank, you don't have to fight the battle as hard.
Yeah.
That's good. One thing though that made me think of when you said that was sometimes when people are being transparent, but not necessarily like vulnerable in that, they're not getting the being with or the loneliness taken care of or being known, as we were all saying. And I did notice that sometimes it would just be getting it out, but not actually getting to attachment, like you were saying, or the bonding.
Right. So how do I receive love is really a question that is hidden inside of that. And learning how to be receptive to people's investment, their involvement, their care, their understanding. And like you talked earlier, a lot of this goes back to our kids' phase.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like I was so alone back then. I didn't know how to let someone, no one showed up in my life. So I didn't know how to let someone show up for me and feel the weightiness, the goodness, the quality of that. So I know even with some of my clients, I will be saying things where I'm loving on them. I'm saying loving, affirming words. And you can see it's just like bouncing off their forehead. And I'm like, this isn't landing, is it?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I know logically you're saying good things. I don't know how to feel that though. How do I let that make an impact? And so that's a huge question in all this.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump into what are the things that are going on underneath the surface that are driving people to look at porn? So we'll just kind of throw out a few, but so I'd say unmet needs. And one of those things would be comfort. So if you aren't receiving comfort, you definitely, porn becomes something that can feel comforting to you.
Right. What are ways that you see, Laura, that people get comfort needs met?
So comfort needs with compassion, of being able to have someone, because compassion's not just like, poor you're going through this thing and you have these issues that you're not being able to connect.
Right.
It's, I feel you, I'm with you, and understanding you and knowing you. And so being able to have compassion come be with them. But I do like how you're saying unmet needs, because one of the unmet needs that I consider very valuable is play.
Yeah.
And play is actually a powerful comforter, especially in that early childhood development, because that's actually how we receive.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's almost like one of those things you wouldn't think that you would apply to a lonely child, but play is actually one of the most powerful comforters for children.
It's interesting that you said that, because I was talking to somebody who said, I don't know why I'm so messed up. It was one of those conversations. I don't know why I'm so screwed up. My parents were good, blah, 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 blah. And I started asking around in their childhood. And one of the things I asked was like, how did your parents play with you? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, at some level, they're sitting down and playing action figures with kids. And as they develop, then it's like throwing a baseball back and forth. And they're just staring at me. And they're like, that didn't happen. My parents never played with me. But that's not bad, is it? Like, well, they're not bad for it. But the element of play is so necessary. It's an engagement of your heart. It helps you to feel cared about. It helps you to feel alive. It inspires you to create. It brings something up inside of the child, because children are meant to play. It's part of their experience. And they were like, oh my gosh, now that I think of it, I think I was kind of neglected in that way. Yeah, maybe a little bit. Yep. Yeah. And that's real. So like you said, that's a huge must in needs. What else?
Which that I think kind of ties into boredom or living uninspired.
Yeah.
I actually had that thought too. Yeah,
did you?
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
What were you going to say? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that like bored is a desire for connection. It's not bored as in I'm bored, go do another chore.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of parents say is just go do another chore. I'll
Find
give you something to do. Yeah, exactly. But they're actually looking for connection. Mm-hmm. And I find that in adults as well. We say we're bored, but really we're looking for connection.
Emotional intimacy.
Yeah. And people started some of their addictions from boredom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't always just because their spouse neglected them. It was because they were just bored and they were wondering, and then they just stumbled upon it.
Can you imagine if a parent had a kid walk up to them, and every time the kid walks up to him and the kid goes, Mom, Dad, I'm bored, the parent went, oh, do you need some connection right now?
I know. I love that.
It's time to connect. How that would change everything.
Yeah, but it's like percentages of parents that respond that way is like very low.
Minimal.
Yeah, exactly. Not even, again, because the parent's bad, but because they're missing the signal. It's like they're having a missed connection where the parent doesn't even know it. Yeah.
It's the kids are communicating in a language that doesn't, I mean, parents are like, I have a million things to do. I'm not bored.
Yeah. So I'll give you something to do.
Yes.
Which is a really good thing for adults as you're listening to this to go, okay, next time something inside of me goes, oh, I'm so bored right now.
Yeah.
Let that be a flying red flag that tells you, oh, I might need to go get connection. What does it mean for me to go get connection?
Well, and even what we were just talking about how important play is, if you are struggling in life, looking at, are you still expressing play now? And so like because that's an unmet need that can create this funnel to, I get all of my endorphins from watching porn. Instead of I get endorphins from playing volleyball, I get endorphins from going
goofing
on
around,
hikes.
Joking with people.
Yes.
I would say, I don't know about you guys, but my observation in my office, would be the percentage of play that's inside of most of my clients' life was maybe 5% out of a 95% life.
I agree too.
Maybe max they're experiencing. The rest of it is I have expectations and worries. I have things to take care of.
Yeah. I wouldn't be even surprised if people listening right now are a little offended.
Right.
One of the solutions to pornography is play. They're like, I have a serious problem here. You don't take a serious problem and then play.
You have to go happy and laugh. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that won't fix anything. I need to white knuckle it and hate myself. Yeah, it's a lot of adults lose the childlike wonder, and that's like medicine for our souls to be able to be whole. Another one of the unmet needs that I think leads to porn is rejection. So oftentimes the way that I see this play out is either people feel rejected. So there's so many different ways this could be. Let's say it's a girl and a guy rejects her. She's going to go look at porn because she can't be rejected by the guy in the porn. So she now has power over, I don't get rejected here. Or let's say it's not even specifically romantic. You just are feeling rejected in life by friends, by family. Again, porn can be something where people feel a temporary empowerment. I'm in control. It's not an empowerment, it's a control. I have the power. You can't reject me. I get to feel high and I get to feel this fake connection.
I get to feel desired and chosen.
Mm-hmm.
I get to feel bonded to without any fear that you'll abandon me.
Yeah, absolutely. What else do you see, Laura, possibly as far as needs go?
With needs being met, I do think this isn't particularly a need being met, but even just ignorance, especially an introduction to porn, which usually happens, like we were saying, a lot younger.
Yeah. There's
an ignorance to it. And there's a lot of like innocence connected in like the beginnings. If you hear people's beginnings, they're like, I didn't even realize it. I didn't even like it. I felt, I didn't know what to do with it. But without having anyone to teach you, which would be I consider teaching a need that we need in our early childhood development.
Yeah.
So you had no one to teach you what pornography was, why we feel the way we feel,
Yeah.
what's going on inside your body, what's going on inside your heart, what's going on inside your mind. And so that lack of being taught really creates this ignorance. And then this ignorance
Yeah. creates
a greater shame storm going on with it, because you feel stuck in it because you don't understand it. And so I'm talking about kids in that, but adults don't understand it either.
Right.
They don't know what's happening to them. And that sounds like a cop out, but they're like, I don't even know. I was doing so good. And then all of a sudden I was just like there, and before I even knew it. And of course, obviously people can make excuses, but they're being genuine. They're saying they don't even know how they got caught back up in it. And so I feel like just not being taught and learning about it too.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you teach people who are stuck in ignorance?
Well, I wanted to add to that just a quick thing. Now, in one of our previous episodes on this series, I talk about it a little bit, but I wanted to add it again here. My first encounter with pornography was being in my aunt's bedroom. And I was in there trying to build a fort, where it's like, oh, go in there and play and build a fort. And then I find this Playboy under the bed. And I'm like, what is this? And I start looking at it. And when she comes in, she has a meltdown. She's like, oh, that's not ours. That was left here from the previous people who lived here. I remember that to this day. And I was like, I think 5 years old, maybe something around there. But I remember her excuse to this day. And I could see the terror on her face because he's about to go tell mom and dad potentially. And I have a complete and utter meltdown and take off running out of the trailer that she was living in. She was like living in a trailer park. And I go running out and run and hide. And I hide for I don't know how long, but I can hear her screaming in the background, Justin, because I'm like, oh, I did something horrible. Because I could feel her emotions about it. Yeah. Now when I return, I finally come back because you got to come back at some point. Oh gosh, face the piper. I go walking through that front door, and she had made, now this is interesting because I had battles with weight for so long in my life, but she had made peanut butter and jelly sandwich and tomato soup, which were my two favorite things to eat together. I go and I sit down and I start to eat a little bit, and she's very quiet. And I remember laying my head down at the table and falling asleep at the table because now as an adult, I understand it. Then I didn't.
Trigger.
I was so overwhelmed with shame about the situation and didn't know what to do with it. And she didn't have a way of communicating with me. And there was an abandonment then and an ignorance of I don't know. I'm just trapped in this thing that's happened to me now.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's really hard as a parent to not have an emotional reaction to finding out your kid has seen porn or the person you're babysitting or whatever. But our reactions, especially when kids are so young and innocent, our reactions become a part of their wiring about themselves through their interpretation, which is dangerous. So I could be surprised and they could decide that I hate them for it. But now that is forever connected in their brain.
Until there's a
porn.
conversation that something happens. Yeah. And that was never injected. I didn't have that conversation with her. And I never once had a sex conversation with my parents.
Yeah.
And so then I was left in that.
That's the ignorance that I'm talking about that really is a strong force. And it kind of like a one that we don't really notice because we think it's just about that magazine, which we can tell by your story. It was one of the smallest parts of the whole story.
It was the smallest. Yeah. It was I don't even know that you told any details about the magazine.
That was what's this? And then the rest was what caused the trauma.
Uh-huh.
So what do you tell people who have ignorance to help them educate?
Yeah. So a level of reparenting and a level of being able to tell the story differently than their parents were able to tell them.
So describe both of those.
So they would say we'd go back to being younger, go back to that experience. A lot of times it's actually not the experience, it's the shame after the experience, or it's when you sat with it and didn't know what it was, and then you got really scared and then you didn't want to tell anyone. And the secrecy, usually more like in a child's bedroom, after it happened a couple days before, they start ruminating on it and thinking about it. So it's not always the moment, but wherever their moment of connection to that shame is, then I go back and I help them bring moms and dads in that could have that conversation because our parents didn't know how to have that conversation, but this generation coming up, parents are getting a lot better at having this conversation.
Yeah, they really
There's
are.
resources. There's more of a comfortableness in it. It's less shame connected to it. And so I'm saying, who in your life has given you the adult sex talk, which sounds funny, but there are people that we're learning from as adults and bringing in their calm in it.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing when you say a cuss word or kid says a cuss word and the parent's like, oh, and washes their mouth out with soap
Totally.
and, you know, does all the things. They're like, that word is powerful. So it's the same reaction that our parents had to pornography that made pornography feel really powerful.
Yeah.
Right. And they would have brought calm and peace.
Then pornography doesn't feel so monstrous.
No.
Oh yeah, it's just porn. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, exactly. It really is though, because it doesn't have any power anymore. And for the most part, it's like drinking like coffee when you're little. You're like, I don't like this. But then you keep drinking and drinking it. And then eventually you like it. It's a similar thing. If you ask most people when they first saw pornography, what was their first perception of it is gross, confusing, dirty. Yeah. Like just like don't know. Like they just like, what is happening here? So if you were able to calmly with peace tell them what it is and be honest about it, be able to disassociate them, who they are from what they did. It's a huge thing. Even if you purposely looked at this, even if you went out of your way to find this website, you are not a bad boy. You are not a bad girl, you know, and being able to help that coding become a different story, because as soon as they have that new memory of calm and peace, then they're actually able to say, it's not that big of a deal. And I'll even have them look back at the pornography as a child. And what do you feel for it? And their feeling for it now, their appetite for it is really different. They're like, it's not that big of a deal. And that's not meaning that we don't take it serious. And we're not saying that it's not of course, something that we don't want any of our children, you know, to be involved in. Right. But you're taking the power of it away when you respond calmly.
Like when it'd be like, don't say this word. If you tell somebody, just make sure in this next hour you never say never. Like, and then all of a sudden you're like, I never even say never, but now I have to. Yeah. Like it becomes this pull that is so obsessive when things have that power. And so I really love that you're talking about it's kind of like letting the steam out from
That's a good way
intensity,
to describe it. Yeah.
So that you can relax and then you can freely let it go instead of having this vice grip that you're wrestling yourself on.
Yeah.
One of the needs I was thinking that I think is underlying porn is inadequacy.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Do you want to describe that?
Yeah. There's this, I remember back in college for me, one of the things that came up in my pornography addiction was consistently feeling inadequate towards life. Like, I'm never going to be anything. I'm not anything. My life doesn't matter at all. And so what that bred was an intense amount of hopelessness. It reinforced the abandonment that I felt, that inadequacy of not being enough as a man, not being enough as a human, not being enough for people, whatever that was. All of a sudden, it left me again in this space of going over here to isolate and go, all right, I need to feel like I'm somehow powerful. I need to feel like I'm somehow desirable. And I didn't know how to put love towards myself in the ways of going like, no, I am more than enough. I love who I am. Right. My life matters regardless of how much money I make or what job I perform. Instead, I was just in this abandonment melange of self-deprecating emotions of lack. And so that played a huge role in it. And it isn't until in that area that we actually get love in, that affirmation, and we begin to reflect a higher unconditional love towards ourselves, that we can actually find healing from that inadequacy that drives us to that place.
So I have lots of people that when they hit that I'm failing everything, it's like almost like, so their brain has connected the dots. Porn is failure. I'm a failure when I look at porn, which is a very shame response. So when they feel like they're a failure in life, they do something that proves they're a failure.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I am already failing. now I'm just going to do something that I already define as failing. Or there's the other one, which is I feel like I'm failing and I want to feel like I'm in control. And so I'm going to look at this so that again, so much of what humans are looking for is they're looking for an answer to the pain inside of them. They're looking for a solution. So most people that I work with don't know that. So probably my first meeting with people who struggle with porn is I'm like, I want you to journal every time you want to look at porn, what you were thinking about before. Even if you look at porn, like I don't even start with don't do it. I just start with, let's just start with keeping a journal. What were you thinking about? What were you feeling? Most of the times they have no idea. They're subconsciously being driven to watch this thing, and they're not paying attention to what's going on inside of them at all. They have no idea that they felt something before it. They have no idea that they thought something before it. They've never investigated or been curious because porn is so taboo and so bad that the only option is just try to avoid it at all costs. Not, okay, let's look and see what's going on inside around
Right, because you're never actually really present with pornography. You've now gone into a triggered state of disconnection from self by the time you go into pornography.
Yeah.
So, as you ramp up to it, again, there's shame around it. There's all kinds of things. So it's very hard for people to go, what if I had to go be present with myself? And a lot of times, again, like you said earlier, I think you were saying, Laura, they were like, I don't even know how I ended up there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up because there's something where they disconnected entirely from their being. And then their being went to find a solution for the pain that they're in, whatever was going on. And then they recheck back in and they're like, what did I just do?
Yeah. So I would describe porn as a person subconsciously looking for a solution to the pain inside.
Yeah.
And they're not driving, like they're not consciously thinking, this is me looking to a solution for that. And so what I'm trying to do when I'm helping people get through it is to try to slow them down.
Yeah. Get them out of autopilot.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get them to actually like, wait, before I log on, what is that? What am I actually thinking and feeling?
Yeah.
Even if they still end up logging
Yeah.
on, even if they still end up doing it, I'm wanting them to just begin, because one of the ways that the brain works is that when you're in a triggered state, all of the blood is in your amygdala, which is your emotional center. It's out of your executive order in the brain. So you're not logically thinking when you're in a trigger. And they say that self-awareness is the fastest way to get the blood from your emotions back to your executive order so you can actually be thinking and be in control. And I don't even know that most people know when they have a porn addiction that they have switched over into being triggered and are out of, like, they're not driving typically by the time they have begun watching it.
Yeah, that's really, really well explained. Yeah. That brain connection, again, not to make excuses for what people are doing, but that autopilot of your brain just going into what you know to do to get connection is literally a force that's driving you that you're not even aware of. And I do fully agree that a lot of it's just because we're in a triggered state, and which means that it's not our true self looking at porn. Our true self would never look at porn.
Right.
But our triggered, not bonded, not attached, disconnected is trying to find connection through that.
Yeah.
I think that's such a good way to say it, because when you start to see, like, when I'm full of love, I'm getting my needs met, I make different decisions. If you looked at me in our marriage, when I am the most triggered, it is the least like who I actually am. You know, and we typically recognize triggers when, like, people are screaming and exploding at each other or slamming doors. But I don't know that most people know that if you're looking at porn, you're in a triggered state. Like, you have already been triggered. When you desire it, that means you've already been triggered.
Yep.
But it can be, what people don't understand is you can be triggered subconsciously. You don't have to have a huge reaction. You could see a commercial on TV of somebody that is wealthy. It could subconsciously remind you that you don't feel capable. And then all of a sudden you find yourself looking at porn. It can be that it doesn't mean you
Very
started
slight.
crying because you don't have enough. You may not have even consciously thought about it, because so many of us are so disconnected from ourselves that we are not aware of what is going on subconsciously, and everything is subconscious.
Yeah.
The more you get to know yourself, and the more you talk about your feelings, and the more you take time to investigate them, and even looking at, like, I tell people to begin, hey, check in with yourself 3 times a day, get a feelings wheel, and just what are you feeling 3 times a day? Just that will begin to help your subconscious, all that's going on inside of you, begin to become more conscious for you to deal with.
One of the things that we're talking about here is connection, right? Connection to self, connection to others. And one of the things that almost 100% of the time across the board, when I get strongly religious people, which are religion, we can look at that in a few different ways. But when I say religion, it's rule-based people. And we can talk about faith inside of that context, and that's expressed where people will be very driven by their faith and their religion, their rules of their faith. Those also rules can apply. You may not even have a spiritual faith, but you're still living under religion, which is a rule-based system. And so a lot of people in those systems are very offended at the idea of connecting to your heart and feeling your emotions. They love their analytical mind. They love participating in their analytical mind. But that analytical mind, almost 100% across the board, when I have clients who come in like that, especially as using religious people as an example, across the board, I can say, okay, so what's going on with your porn addiction?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I don't have a porn addiction. Yeah, you do. Sure you do. Because you deeply need connection, but you're analytical and you're living according to your religious rules. So I know that there's an outlet somewhere, and you don't know how to connect to your own heart. You don't know how to connect to people. So I know you're finding a false sense of connection somewhere else. Yeah. And so the reason I'm pointing this out is that at the core of all this, there'll be a lot of you listening, and I'm going, your solution isn't going to come from more analyzing, more analytical stuff, because that's what's getting you here in the first place. You have to begin to go on the journey of going, I need to connect to myself. This is a connection issue.
Well, and exactly what you said, when people demonize emotions and are like, just live without, like, just run over them. You just need to be happy, or you just need to say declarations, or whatever it is that people... When you cut yourself off from your emotions will always find a way to erupt in your life. Yeah. And so I would say typically what goes hand in hand, very religious people often have sexuality addictions because they're shoving down all of their needs, all of their emotions, and then they are all manifesting over here. And that doesn't make you bad, but it's again why we're bringing up this subject, because there is a value to understanding what's going on inside of you and learning the actual tools to be able to get your needs met. Shameless plug for the Compassion Project, because that's actually what the whole thing is built on, is trying to help you understand your needs and how to actually begin meeting them, not only with other people, but with yourself. Another one that I wanted to hit. Oh, did you want to?
Well, I have one that I want to hit.
Okay, go ahead.
For men. I want to talk about woman hatred.
I was just going to tell you to hit that.
Get out of my head.
I could hear you.
You don't know me. You're making that up. You're a liar.
You're a liar. Is there some women hatred? Just
go back to your town and lie, Phil.
Good act, guys. Good act.
Yeah. A lot of the men, and I'll speak for men, and because I think that there's a place to have a dialogue at some point. Maybe that'll be in our next episode about women and women's challenge with pornography and stuff. But a lot of the men who are in pornography, as I dialogue with them about it, will get under the surface, and we find out they all had really painful relationships with their moms. Now, that could be their mom was extremely distant, or their mom used them all the time as a crutch. Overbearing, controlling, demanding.
Needy.
And there was this war, and at some level, in some way, shape, or form, they felt so powerless to mom on whatever side of that equation you're looking at. And so there is this underlying hatred for women, underlying hatred for mom, and how mom hurt them, and how mom used them, or how mom neglected them. And so then there's overarching power move that happens for guys that when they actually engage pornography, it's them feeling dominant and powerful all of a sudden. And instead of dealing with the pain of the mom wound that exists there, they end up going and taking it out on the pornography.
Yeah. And that can sound like harsh. I actually think that you had a time when you went through forgiveness with your mom when you were younger that like dramatically affected you with being set free in porn. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that conversation. I'm sitting here going, what was that?
No, you had like a dream about your mom and then you recognized it was years and years ago when we were dating. And then you recognized that you had a lot of hatred towards her. You walked through forgiveness and then there was a breakthrough for you. Okay, well, I just repeated it.
I'll remember here in a minute.
You guys can't see Justin, but he's really trying.
He's really thinking. He's really thinking.
His mind's going, what was that?
But like, if you get under that, because women could hear that and be like so mad, like you have woman hatred, and women do the same thing. We have man hatred all the time. There's so many women with man hatred issues.
What?
But
no. Women never hate men.
If you get under those words, if you can get under your trigger that you just went into from hearing that, you could see, oh, that means there's little boys who are really hurt and who feel really scared and who feel really out of control and who feel really helpless and don't know what to do. And they don't have solutions or answers or kindness to someone teaching them to help them have a voice or help them learn or to be able to set boundaries. And so under hatred is always a hurt little kid. And so hatred is not, I'm a horrible human. It is, I'm trying to protect myself from being demolished. And most of the time, the only way I know how to, like lots of times the way people know how to protect themselves from being demolished is anger or hatred.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else in this area, Laura, that you learned from relating to the men that you haven't shared about in there?
I would bring up shame, just because that's a really strong, thing that keeps us stuck in it.
Yeah.
And a little bit when you're talking about like the rule followers and you're talking about being triggered in it and it being kind of the autopilot, is one of the hard things about pornography or any sexual addiction is the fact that you can't do it. You can't stop. How do I explain this? So shame is what you do is who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you are stuck in shame about having a sexual addiction, you think it's who you are.
Yeah. I'm a pervert.
Yeah. So then you try to do it differently. And when you try to do it differently, it actually increases the shame.
Yeah.
Because shame is what you do.
Right.
So one of the reasons why people get so trapped in pornography specifically is because shame can't be done or undone. You can't make it change. The only way that you can actually get behind shame is through compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But because we feel so horrible about ourselves, if you had hatred towards a woman and you feel dominating, you probably got just as triggered as women when you heard that. Right. Yep, I'm a monster. And so that shame of feeling like you're a monster tells you need to be better.
Right.
You need to be good.
You need to just not have this anymore. You need to be over it.
Yeah. And most people that are stuck in addiction don't just go, oh, what? I'm stuck. Most people are trying to get out. They're clawing their way out. No, they do not want to be in it. But they're told, follow the rules, do the right thing, then you can be free.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But it doesn't work that way. You can't follow the rules to get out of addiction. You have to get your need met. You have to get your pain taken care of to be able to be free from shame so that you can actually get out of addiction.
Yes.
It's interesting because there was a component in college for me where I was, my friend James, who was, 15 years older than me or so, I was talking to him about the porn that I was into and stuff. And he was like, Justin, he reminded me of a biblical scripture, Romans 8:1. Now, therefore, brethren, there is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. It was a simple thing, and it could have been very religious and just been like, all right, whatever. But I heard the weight of it. Oh, I'm not condemned. And I started to meditate on that idea of maybe I'm actually not condemned. Maybe there's not some big creator in the sky who's just so damning towards me every time I make this decision. And maybe he actually loves me and wants to be present with me in this. And so in these moments of participating in pornography, a lot of times I would begin to say, God, I give you permission to love me right now.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not you believe in a God or a creator, whatever, but there is a separation from a relationship with love that happens for people. Like we're talking about shame. We're talking about how all of a sudden when I engage in practices like this, we're cutting ourselves off from love, whether it's the shame we feel or we're actually not connecting into love. That's why we're with this fantasy over here.
Right.
It's something that's not actually engaged love. And so I begin to just say, like, I give you permission to love me and be with me. And I would begin to have this overwhelming encounter where all of a sudden I would feel present with myself. I would feel present with this sense of love around me. And all of a sudden, I didn't want to participate, not because I thought I was bad, but because all of a sudden there was a need at the core of me suddenly being fulfilled. A need, that need being I'm cared for, I matter, I'm not all alone suddenly. I'm not just not alone because all of a sudden I believe that God is here with me, but I'm not all alone because I'm not disconnecting from self. And one of the core roots of abandonment inside of the human condition is when we disconnect from ourselves. That's where abandonment is amplified. And so really what we're talking about here, some of what Laura's talking about and we're talking about is really reconnecting to destroy that abandonment thing that causes us to run to something else to cope with that pain of loneliness and disconnection.
Well, and when I was listening to you, I just kept thinking of like that we have the order wrong. And this happens so much in churches specifically, but also just in marriages and relationships. So the order is you do right, then you're loved.
Yeah.
Like once you get good behavior, then you belong. Once you do good behavior, then you get to receive love. And I know like for my own journey, this was the massive hinging point, which is when I recognized that that's like not actually, so like I believe in the good news. I'm like, that's not good news to like have to perform for love. That's the whole world. Like, how is that different than anything that we've experienced? The good news is when you're loved before you have transformed. And the analogy that I've always used is like a kid who's starving for love and starving for food. I mean, and their why can't I think of the name? Their caretaker is not letting them eat because they're making mistakes, because they're not doing things perfect. And the caretaker keeps saying like, once you finish building this house, then I'll let you eat. Once you look less scrawny, then I'll let you eat. Once you do better at school, then I'll let you eat. Like, which is not a logical thing. Like the kid needs food to be able to be strong enough to build. It needs food to be able to concentrate at school. It needs food
to put on weight.
And so that's the idea of love has to come in first. Compassion has to come in first. There has to be a place where, and I do the exact same things with my clients, whatever addiction that they're working on. I'm like, okay, well, when you're in it, when you are eating, you're binge eating all the food and you recognize it, I just want you to stop and invite God to love you there. Just allow the all divine, loving source to come break in. When you are in the middle of porn and you've recognized it, when you are in the middle of jerking off, I want you to actually, and you're like, oh, wait, what am I doing? Like, I actually want you to invite love into that moment because, again, when first things are first, when you actually get the love need met, you are clear enough and capable enough to make brand new decisions.
Yeah. And that really changes the vision for sexual purity because now your vision is not absence of addiction. Your vision is presence of love.
Yes.
Because I've seen people come in, they haven't looked at porn for 2 years, but they still have a pornography issue because they're doing the right thing.
Yep.
They're white knuckling it.
Yep.
They're suppressing their need.
Yeah.
But they vision is distorted and they don't know why they're still so unhappy. They don't know why they're being so triggered because their goal wasn't presence of love.
Right.
It was absence of the addiction.
So true.
One of the things that I ask my clients, I want to add here, is oftentimes when we do start talking about pornography, I begin to investigate what kind of porn. What does pornography mean to you? What does that look like? That. How are you engaging it? Mm-hmm. You know, and some guys will be like, I like watching pornography where the guy is being heavily dominated. Oh, what does that say about something going on inside of your heart and your experience? Some of them, I'm dominating women. Some of them are, it feels really connective and it's not really dirty or anything. Totally. And it feels like they're loving each other. So there's different angles as you investigate, and all of a sudden you go, oh, this shows that you really want connection. Oh, this might show that there's some pain with your mom, or this might show that you feel powerless in this area. This might show that there's some self-hatred going on inside of your heart. And I wanted to add that because when you're asking like, I don't even know how to get self-awareness. How would I even know what's going on inside of me? That's a simple thing. Like, what kind of porn have I been looking at? What is the relational behavior that I'm drawn to inside of these experiences? And those sometimes can show a clear map.
Yeah. So I would say most of my clients can't figure out what they're drawn to. Like, I'll make them tell me they have no idea what it represents because they're so in their triggers. So you might need help with somebody to help you understand that. But at least becoming curious about it. Yes. Because it's not just it's wrong and bad, I need to stop.
Right.
I'm curious what this is representing. Why am I drawn to this? Mm-hmm. Okay, there's just probably like 3 more that I want to hit just so that we're trying to give you self-awareness for why we're giving you lots of language to help you be able to come back and be like, oh, I think I recognize that could be a driver for me. So one of them is past sexual pain is one of the reasons that people are drawn to porn. So it could be like a learned behavior. I know a lot of kids, like somebody made them watch porn or showed them porn or made them watch them having a sexual relationship with, like, there's a lot of abuse that includes children having, and it just becomes a part of the way their brain is wired at that point.
Yeah. I know that I had a couple of guys at a young age. It was after my first encounter, maybe when I was about 10 to 13, and they had a couple of Playboys that they'd stolen from his dad's stash or mom's boyfriend's stash. And they were like, hey, you need to look at this. And I was like, I don't want to look at that. I don't like that. And they began to humiliate me. And I know that there's some people who have been humiliated into an experience. Right. And now they say, well, there must be something wrong with me if I don't agree with this. And culturally, and we'll probably say this many times in this series, but culturally, it's very easy for us to say, oh, pornography is normal. No, pornography is common now when we look statistically at it, but it is not normal. And the lie that's sold to us is when I don't enjoy it or want to participate in this, that there's something unnormal about who I am. And I just want to dispel that lie again, because a lot of people go, oh, I need to have this thing in my life.
Well, and that was going to be one of the things I said is peer pressure. There's a huge part of men who have engaged pornography. Probably originally it wasn't something that super pulled them, but because of peer pressure, this is what a man is. This is what a woman is. This is who you have to be. And there is a lot of peer pressure. I see this with women a lot. So they will like feel pressured by their boyfriends. Their boyfriends watch porn. So now they feel pressured to look at porn with their boyfriends. They want to make their boyfriends happy. So they want to do something, even if it crosses what feels good to them. And there's this weird thing where like you can hate doing it. And then when that person is out of your life, you end up then like becoming addicted to it because it feels familiar and it reminds you of connection. And there's also this place where I've seen lots of people, they feel peer pressure like, oh, I'll know more about sex if I watch porn. I will, I'll have better things to do. Or the other side is I feel powerless to how sexualized this culture is. So the only way for me to not be a victim to somebody sexualizing me is for me to like be in charge of my own. Like I watch porn. Like I've seen a lot of women, and I'm sure this could be true for men too, but specifically I've seen a lot of women who are like, well, men just love porn and sex and they're going to use you sexually. So I might as well take sexuality and disconnect it from emotions so that I don't get hurt by them. It's like a protector.
Right. A power play.
I'll love porn and then I'm cool with you guys and then you can't hurt me because I haven't made it something that's vulnerable. I've taken the vulnerability and the intimacy out of it. And what happens is the peer pressure in society right now keeps this role going where each person keeps taking, well, I don't want to be hurt by you, so I'm going to take vulnerability out of sexuality. Well, I don't want to be hurt by you, so I'm going to take vulnerability out of sexuality. And now we have sexuality, which this is what porn is, or sleeping with a ton of people all the time and no emotional connection, which is we have disconnected intimacy from sexuality.
Right.
Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Well, one to add on the peer pressure, on the shame component, a lot of people have gotten shamed into porn. I'm not just talking about early childhood things, but the idea of if you don't look at porn and participate in this type of sexuality, you will be a terrible lover in the bedroom.
Yeah.
You won't be prepared. You will look like a fool when you begin to engage sexually with a spouse or something else. So you need to be prepared by implementing this into your life rather than a lifestyle of going, oh no, it's beautiful to explore with a spouse sexuality and grow in my sexuality. There's no shame in not knowing something. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of life, is that we grow together.
But again, that's vulnerability and sexuality.
Right.
And we have a culture right now that here's the truth though. When Laura talks about being with or being attuned with, or I talk about intimacy and getting your needs met, all of vulnerability is fundamental to letting love in.
Do you have anything more to say about vulnerability, Laura, on that?
Yeah, I was thinking the vulnerability is really what keeps us connected to our true self. Yeah. And so if we're not connected to our true self, then we are more susceptible to peer pressure. We're more susceptible to becoming what anyone else wants us to be. And so vulnerability is a protective inside of us, a protection inside of us so that we can stay true to who we are. And if you're worried about what other people are thinking, if you're feeling pressure to do things you don't feel comfortable with, then be able to come back to who you really are and be able to live in that vulnerable place. It'll actually keep you from being susceptible to peer pressure.
That's really good. There's one last one. Now, this is not the last one. We didn't make a comprehensive list of every underlying need from porn because that would be long.
It's a great list, though. I was like,
into it.
Yeah, these are some really good points.
Yeah, but what we're thinking, one of the ones we haven't touched on yet in this one that I wanted to is the way that our brains are wired from childhood development and just the habit of porn. Because what people don't understand is things can become habits. So I know some clients who like they actually learn to get their needs met and they learn how to have compassion and they get love in and they break shame and they start having intimacy, but they still are drawn to porn because of the habit of it. And it's kind of the same way when you break up with a girlfriend or boyfriend. Let's say you talk to them every day or you text them every day. There's this period of loneliness that may or may not be about the person, but about the fact that you have a habitual person every time something happens in your life to talk to. Sometimes the habit of dating partner is harder to overcome than who you actually dated.
It's true.
And so that can happen in so many areas of our life where our brain gets wired. So I wanted you to talk about just the habit of it and how you've seen people have to work through that.
So I say a lot of times that our adult self is like a website. So we put all this energy and time into trying to change our adult self, but your coding is what's determining your website.
Oh, girl, that is so good.
Yeah, so being able to recognize that you can, as an adult, do all this work and have your brain and your self-control and everything working in the direction of purity. But if you don't actually take care of your coding which is your early childhood development, then you're going to keep repeating the same habit, the same coding, and that will determine what you're doing as an adult.
Yeah.
And so if you have, as an adult, with people that are listening right now, if you've done a lot of work with your adult self, but you still feel like you're bumping up against the same issues, it's because your coding is not lining up with your adult brain process. And so going back to those childhood codings and rewriting the story, bringing in the things that you didn't get, like I was talking about before with teaching, bringing in the things you didn't get. So now my coding says sex is pure. You know, I am pure. I am connected. I am loved. And as those codings start to change, then as an adult, it dominoes up to being an adult. Then when you look back on it, you don't have the same drive. And the beautiful thing about that is it's automatic. I've seen so many people white knuckling trying to be pure, and they're exhausted. And whatever you do manually, which means what you do as an adult manually, you have to maintain manually. So eventually you're going to fail because you can't maintain it manually forever. But if you get your coding to tell a different story and to be full, then that will automatically cause your perspective to change and your need to change.
Really, what you're talking about is Back to the Future movie, where you can go, you go back in time and it can change the future. When you go back to what was happening in the past and you actually you make different choices and you connect to compassion and get love in there, then all of a sudden your adult self has new beliefs.
Yep. It's so good. So as we wrap this up, Laura, what are ways, do you want to just share a few ways people can connect to you and things that you're up to?
Well, I just wanted to promote. She is, you can find her on Instagram at Laura Duncan Consulting.
Yes.
And she does online and in person. She does retreats, but she also does seminars,
workshops, I call them.
Facilitating workshops.
Online as well. So it's not just if you live locally, but online. And my website's just lauraduncan.com.
And she is amazing. And I would recommend that after all of you buy the Compassion Project. No,
you're so cute.
But I would recommend, if you or your partner, or if you have people in your life that are trapped in porn, Laura is one of the best resources. And again, you're going to go to a workshop that's not going to be about porn, but it's going to be about getting to the roots of what's going on underneath there to help bring freedom and wholeness. And I actually had porn in mind as one of the things when we made the Compassion Project, because I've worked with so many people that have no concept of what's actually going on underneath the surface, and you end up blaming, and again, people start feeling hopeless, like there's no hope for them to change, because if you spend years running in the hamster wheel and you don't get anywhere, you're going to feel like there's no point, but there is actual hope. And so we're going to talk,
definitely hope.
We're going to keep talking through more of this in this series, how to overcome. Thank you so much for listening.
And go ahead and rate, review, subscribe, and share if you got anything out of this. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Justin Stumball and Abi Stumball. And peace out.